What happened to Keith Washington? Once hailed as one of R&B's smoothest voices, he stormed onto the scene in the early 90s with his unforgettable debut hit, Kissing You. But just as quickly as he rose, his career began to unravel, tangled up in personal scandals, infidelity, and even a shocking controversy involving the Queen of Soul herself, Aretha Franklin. How does a man with Grammy nominations, chart-topping singles, and undeniable talent become one of the forgotten voices of R&B? Today, we uncover the sad decline of Keith Washington, the rise, the fall, and the drama that left fans asking, whatever happened to him? Keep watching to find out. Keith Douglas Washington was born on November 15, 1960, in Detroit, Michigan, the fourth of 6 children. His biological father eventually left the family, and his mother later remarried a man whom Keith would always credit as a steady and supportive presence in his life. Growing up in the Motor City gave him the perfect backdrop to nurture his talents. Detroit was a place overflowing with some of the world's greatest singers, songwriters, and performers, and even within his own family, music ran deep. Keith's gift for singing was first uncovered by one of his sisters. She overheard him at just 6 years old, belting out a James Brown song she loved to play. Impressed, she had him sing for the rest of the family, who all agreed he had something special. Determined to help him develop his gift, she introduced him to their aunt, who was already involved in the music business. From there, Keith began performing at various local venues, even nightclubs, earning small paychecks that helped support his large family. By the time he was 17, Keith had joined a doo-wop group and set his sights on bigger opportunities. The group traveled to Philadelphia and International Records, hoping to land a deal with legendary songwriting and production duo Kenneth Gamble and Leon Huff. While Gamble and Huff were intrigued by the group, their attention quickly shifted to Keith himself. His singing style carried the unmistakable influence of Teddy Pendergrass, one of his idols. But as much as they admired his talent, the label already had Pendergrass on their roster, and the world didn't need a duplicate. The deal fell through, and Keith was forced to move on. After the disappointment in Philadelphia, Keith Washington refused to give up. He continued honing his craft and looking for the break that would finally put him on the map. That chance came in 1984, when he made his television debut on the hit talent show Star Search. Although he didn't win the competition, the national exposure proved invaluable. Suddenly, Keith's name was circulating in industry circles, and soon he was being called in for background recording sessions with some of the biggest names in music. Over the next few years, he lent his voice to projects by legends such as Stevie Wonder, George Clinton, Mickey Howard, and even the Jacksons. It was an invaluable education, standing in the studio with icons, studying their craft, and sharpening his own skills. Ironically, Keith's first real breakthrough didn't come from his voice, but from his pen. In 1988, he wrote Hey Lover, a ballad recorded by Freddie Jackson that soared to #1 on the R&B charts. It was proof that Keith's talent extended beyond singing. He had the instincts of a true songwriter. The success gave him credibility, and soon the industry began to take him seriously as both a writer and performer. It wasn't long before Keith stepped into the spotlight himself. His breakout came with the tender ballad, Kissing You. Interestingly, the song might never have been completed if not for Marsha Jenkins, the woman who would later become his wife. Keith had written the first verse but hit a wall, unsure of where to take the story. Marsha stepped in and penned the second half, giving the song the emotional depth it needed. When Keith recorded a demo of Kissing You, it caught the attention of executives at Elektra Records and helped him land a recording contract. Even then, Keith wasn't convinced the song belonged to him. He had originally written it with Anita Baker in mind, hoping to pass it along to the celebrated singer. But fate intervened. During a casual moment in the studio, he accidentally played the track for Elektra's A&R executive. From the first note, the executive was hooked. Keith tried to explain that it was meant for someone else, but he was told in no uncertain terms, "This is your song." That decision would change his life. Kissing You was released as his debut single and quickly became a hit. The ballad climbed into the top 20 on the Billboard Hot 100 and went all the way to #1 on the R&B chart. It earned Keith a Grammy nomination for Best R&B Vocal Performance Male and won him a Soul Train Music Award for Best R&B Soul Single Male. The success of Kissing You set the stage for his debut album, Make Time for Love, which dropped in the spring of 1991. Smooth, romantic, and sophisticated, the project cemented Keith Washington's place in the industry. For a brief moment, he wasn't just a songwriter or a background singer. He was one of R&B's brightest new voices. By the time Keith Washington had completed his debut project, the executive who had championed him at Elektra Records was no longer there. The A&R who believed so strongly in his talent had moved on to work with Quincy Jones. As so often happens in the music industry, when new leadership took over, Keith found himself without an advocate. The new executive wasn't as enthusiastic about his style, and Elektra soon dropped him from the roster. Fortunately, fate once again intervened. The same A&R who had left Elektra spoke highly of Keith to Quincy Jones, one of the most respected figures in the industry. Quincy didn't need much convincing. After hearing Keith's music for himself, he was impressed and welcomed him into the fold, signing him to his own label, Quest Records. It was the kind of validation that not only kept Keith's career alive, but also placed him in the company of some of music's greatest innovators. The project that followed showcased just how versatile Keith could be. In addition to his breakthrough ballad Kissing You, the album featured Are You Still in Love with Me, which climbed to number 15 on the R&B chart. Another standout moment came when Keith joined forces with Australian pop star Kylie Minogue for the duet If You Were With Me Now. Released on her 1991 album Let's Get To It, the single became a surprise international hit, soaring to number 4 on the UK singles chart and introducing Keith's voice to a whole new audience abroad. But it wasn't just official albums that won fans over. Around this time, Keith recorded another memorable duet, this time with rising R&B singer Chanté Moore. Their song, Candlelight and You, first appeared on the soundtrack to the 1991 comedy House Party 2 before finding a home on Chanté's 1992 debut album, Precious. The song struck a chord with listeners and became one of those deep cuts fans cherished, despite never appearing on Keith's own projects. In 1993, Keith released his second album, You Make It Easy. Though it didn't replicate the commercial success of his debut, it produced a handful of singles, including Stay in My Corner, Believe That, and Trippin'. The record reinforced his image as a smooth balladeer, though the momentum of his early success had begun to slow. It would take another 5 years before Keith returned with his third project, simply titled KW. Released in 1998, the album featured the minor single Bring It On, but failed to capture the same level of attention as his earlier work. Behind the scenes, Keith was grappling with personal turmoil. His 14-year marriage to Marsha Jenkins, who had once been his creative partner, co-writing parts of Kissing You, came to an end. Their divorce was painful and public. Marsha later wrote a book titled The Other Side of Through, loosely inspired by their relationship and her experiences with Keith's infidelities. In candid reflections, she admitted that she began to realize the depth of their marital problems when women in the audience would throw undergarments at Keith during his performances. At first, she brushed it off, convinced that love was enough to overcome temptation. But over time, she came to see it as a sign of a deeper fracture in their marriage. For years, Marsha Jenkins tried to look past the rumors and temptations that surrounded her husband. To her, love was enough. She later admitted that, in the early days, she didn't worry much about the attention Keith received from women at his shows. "It didn't bother me at first," she recalled. "I didn't think I had anything to worry about. I knew he loved me. I was naive to think love was all you needed. I wasn't ready to get off my throne. I was the wife, and everybody else was whatever." That confidence came from the image Keith projected to the world. He was marketed as a ladies' man, a suave crooner with a sophisticated air that drew women in wherever he went. The combination of his smooth vocals, polished style, and romantic lyrics made him irresistible to fans. As Keith himself reflected years later during his Unsung episode, fame had opened the door to a brand new world, one brimming with opportunities. Though he never said it outright, many assumed those opportunities included the endless possibilities with women who flocked to him. In quieter moments, however, Keith admitted he carried regret for the way he handled his marriage. "My regret is that because I knew I had a good wife, I know I had a great wife, actually, someone who really stood by me through my hardship of coming up, I became more of acting as though I'm a single man than a married man," he said candidly. "You know you can't do wrong and expect right to come out of it." It was a moment of rare vulnerability from a man whose public persona had always been smooth, confident, and in control. As his music career continued, Keith also began exploring another passion: acting. Hollywood offered him opportunities to expand his image beyond the stage. He landed a small role on the long-running soap opera General Hospital and, in 1993, appeared alongside Janet Jackson in John Singleton's romantic drama, Poetic Justice. These roles gave him exposure to new audiences and hinted at the possibility of a second career in film and television. Perhaps his most memorable screen moment, though, came when he appeared as himself on the hit sitcom Martin. In a now-classic episode, Keith performed the 1978 Roberta Flack and Donny Hathaway ballad The Closer I Get to You with Tisha Campbell Martin. The cameo allowed him to showcase his vocal talent in a setting that blended comedy, romance, and nostalgia, a combination that resonated with fans. Years later, Keith revealed in an interview that he was genuinely surprised he was invited to appear on Martin. There had been tension between him and Martin Lawrence prior to the show, and he wasn't sure the opportunity would ever come his way. "But it was so much that went on before I did the show," he admitted. "I mean, when I tell you it was interesting, you know? It was very interesting. I'm surprised that I even did it. I was surprised when I got the call. I put it that way, okay? I mean, because it was... Michael, Martin, and I are real cool now. That's my dude. Much love and respect for each other. And I thank him and the rest of the team for allowing me the opportunity to show my acting skills and be a part of the Martin Show." I'll leave it at that. In 2013, Keith Washington accepted what would become the most demanding role of his career, portraying soul legend Marvin Gaye in the stage play My Brother Marvin. The casting was met with skepticism at first. Many questioned whether Keith, known primarily as an R&B balladeer, could embody one of the most iconic figures in music history. But any doubts began to fade when Marvin Gaye's own family stepped forward to give him their blessing. They believed Keith had both the talent and the heart to do the role justice. For Keith, the performance was not just an artistic challenge, but also a deeply personal journey. At the time, he was coping with the devastating loss of his mother, who had been murdered. Though Keith has never spoken publicly about the circumstances surrounding her death, the tragedy left a permanent mark on his life. On stage, he drew from that reservoir of pain and emotion, channeling it into his portrayal of Marvin Gaye. The result was a raw, heartfelt performance that resonated with audiences and stood out as one of the most powerful moments in his career. Just a few years earlier, in the summer of 2009, Keith had entered into his second marriage with longtime girlfriend Stephanie Grimes. The couple seemed happy at first, but by 2015 their relationship ended in divorce. During that period, Keith moved back to Detroit and reinvented himself in a new role, this time behind the microphone as a radio personality. Hosting the nighttime slow jam show Kisses After Dark on Kiss 105.9, he brought his smooth voice and love of romantic ballads to late-night listeners, further cementing his reputation as one of R&B's most soulful storytellers. But his time in radio wasn't without controversy. In 2010, Keith experienced one of the most embarrassing moments of his career, and it involved none other than his longtime friend, Aretha Franklin. Hoping to line up an interview with the Queen of Soul, he called her off the air to check in. At the time, Aretha was battling a serious health issue, and she confided in Keith about how she was coping. Their exchange was private and heartfelt. At least, it was supposed to be. Unbeknownst to Keith, someone at the radio station allegedly turned up the fader on the soundboard, capturing the conversation that was on speakerphone. The audio ended up online, and Aretha's private words suddenly became public. The backlash against Keith was swift, with many accusing him of betraying a woman he deeply respected. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Keith released an official statement clarifying what had happened. On November 8th, while on a break from the on-air broadcast, I called Aretha Franklin because it had just come to my attention she had to cancel her tour plans for the next 6 months due to health issues, he explained. Our conversation was captured on the live video stream, as are others, but I was not aware her end of the conversation was audible to the microphone. I would never consciously do anything to hurt her or invade Aretha Franklin's privacy. Both Radio 1 and I regret any distress this has caused to Aretha Franklin, her family, or the public. Though the scandal cast a shadow over his work in radio, Keith eventually moved past it. In the years since, he has kept a relatively low profile. But the 2020 pandemic brought a surprising turn. He built a home studio in Las Vegas and began recording music regularly again. With time on his side and a renewed passion for creativity, Keith slowly returned to the art form that first made him a star. When reflecting on the pandemic, Keith Washington chose to focus on the unexpected positives that came from such a grim period. For him, COVID-19 created the rare opportunity to slow down, meditate, and pursue things his busy career had always kept just out of reach. One of his proudest accomplishments during that time was building a recording studio in his own home. For years, Keith had relied on professional studios, where the clock and the budget often dictated the creative process. With his own space, he gained freedom. Now, he explained, I can start a melody today, step away, and pick it back up tomorrow without worrying about studio hours. The project pushed him to learn new skills. He began studying the craft of producing and engineering, teaching himself industry-standard software like Pro Tools and Logic. By investing in high-quality equipment and microphones, he transformed a room in his house into a fully functional creative hub. The result was not just convenience, but also growth. He became a more polished songwriter, producer, and artist. But the pandemic also left its mark on Keith in more personal ways. He admitted that before COVID-19, he sometimes took people and life itself for granted. That changed when a close friend of his contracted the virus and died only 2 weeks after they had been together. "This is bad, and you don't want this," his friend warned him shortly before passing. The experience shook Keith deeply and made him reconsider his own health choices. With encouragement from his girlfriend, a nurse, he became more mindful about his well-being and the responsibility he carried as someone who regularly performed in front of large crowds. Despite the fear and uncertainty of the pandemic, Keith found empowerment through his music. Building the studio by himself, even painting the room with his own hands, was a symbolic accomplishment. It reminded him of how far he had come since Kissing You made him a star 30 years earlier. For the first time, he allowed himself to pause, reflect, and truly appreciate his blessings. "I'm grateful that God has kept me healthy, that I can still perform, and that people still want to hear my music," he said. "And I'm grateful that I can look good while doing it." With renewed energy, Keith is now working on a new album, excited to share fresh music with his fans. When asked what advice he would give to younger artists, Keith didn't hesitate. He emphasized authenticity. "Be true to yourself and to your craft," he urged. "Understand what you can and cannot do. Don't let people tell you who you are, because in the end, you'll be the one looking in the mirror asking, 'Why did I do that?'" He also warned about the dangers of false encouragement. "Friends will hype you up, tell you you're just as good as Chris Brown, and then you waste money in the studio. The truth is, everyone will take your money, whether you can sing or not. Know your strengths, know your limits. Some artists can't sing, but they can produce. Others rely on gimmicks or auto-tune. If you really believe in what you're doing, go for it, but understand who you are as an artist. Looking ahead, Keith's calendar is far from empty. He is finalizing his new album, still deciding which track will become the first single. We wrote something new that feels just as good, if not better, than what we originally planned, he revealed, noting the importance of timing in any release. In addition, he's involved in a web series, though confidentiality agreements prevent him from sharing details just yet. On the performance side, he continues to tour, with shows scheduled in major cities like Philadelphia, New York, and Chicago, and recent appearances in Denver. As he works on finishing his vocals and shaping the new record, Keith Washington stands as proof that even in difficult times, creativity, resilience, and authenticity can turn setbacks into new beginnings. Even now, he continues to tour, reminding audiences that while his career has had highs and lows, his voice and his story remain unforgettable. But what do you think? Was Keith Washington an underrated talent who never got the recognition he deserved? Or did his personal choices hold him back from lasting success? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories on the forgotten voices of R&B.